Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from the Frontier, and I trust the week's gone well. I'd like to thank Laura Kyle of Al Jazeera Inside Story for inviting me onto her show yesterday regarding Ebola. The headline is Ebola Response Self-Preservation, talking about the death toll passing 1,500, 6 months since the disease was diagnosed in Guinea. World Health Organization says more than half of identified cases have proved fatal. Doctors Without Borders says international efforts have been chaotic and entirely inadequate to the scale of the crisis. Statement said self-protection is occupying the entire focus of states that have the expertise and resources to make a dramatic difference. Donald Kaberuka, and I refer to his comments which are very apocalyptic, said foreign exchange levels are down, markets are not functioning, airlines are not coming in, projects have been cancelled, business people have left. That is very, very damaging. Now we're in the rainy season, and so we talked about all these points. It was the other participants were Michaela Serafini, Medical Director for Doctors Without Borders, and Katie Mark, a filmmaker who had actually just visited Sierra Leone. Do have a look. I basically, I'll come to it in a little while actually, when I talk about recent events on Ebola. It's what I think. I started my morning this morning at the Fairmont at the Norfolk, and I took a photograph, and I'll put that up. I was attending the CIO East Africa Samsung-sponsored breakfast this morning, and a number of things were said. Apparently, and I didn't know this, the tagline for Samsung is "Inspire the world, create the future." And I learned that from Manoj. And he also said that this is the golden age of connectivity, and indeed it is. And they've got some great products and are extremely successful here. My dinner last night in the same place with Charles Ireland, whom I interviewed 20 days ago after his full year results. Great dinner, good company. It was a pleasure yesterday meeting Dominic Barton, the Global Managing Director of McKinsey & Company. I got there at 3, and by 4 I had to go to Inside Stories, so missed the function, but managed to get a good conversation with Dominic, and I look forward to catching up with him. Of course, tomorrow I hope to see you all at Mindspeak at the Intercontinental. Breakfast is from 9:30. We start at 10. Our guest is Dennis McCory of On Phone Media. I was just going through his resume. He's going to be very interesting indeed. And I'm looking forward to that tremendously. We've had great guests, as I said, and of course Madame Lagarde in January to kick the year off. My macro thoughts turn to the last sentence I wrote in my weekly piece. You see, in the old days, these conditions would have created a flight into the dollar, and interestingly, the dollar has been punching higher. If things tip big, the dollar might soar. Home thoughts return to the poet Pablo Neruda. I crave your mouth. I think I've read this before, but it's so good. Your voice, your hair. Silent and starving, I prowl through the streets. Bread does not nourish me. Dawn disrupts me. All day I hunt for the liquid measure of your steps. I hunger for your sleek laugh, your hands the color of a savage harvest. Hunger for the pale stones of your fingernails. I want to eat your skin like a whole almond. I want to eat the sunbeam flaring in your lovely body, the sovereign nose of your arrogant face. I want to eat the fleeting shade of your lashes. And I pace around hungry, sniffing the twilight, hunting for you, for your hot heart like a puma in the barrens of Quitra-2. Isn't that fantastic? It's plain irresistible, I would have thought, and almost as powerful as this, which is in German. Bin ich so in Lieb mit dich, als hätte ich deine Blut getrunken. Sounds better in German, but the translation is, I'm so in love with you It's like I've drunk your blood, and I can tell you in my younger days was an extremely effective way of going about things. Barack Obama has accused Russia of sending troops into Ukraine. Russia has deliberately and repeatedly violated the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine, and the new images of Russian forces inside Ukraine make that plain for the world to see. This comes as Ukrainian forces are making progress against the separatists. I learned from email that Lavrov gave a very detailed response. If you want to go and see what Lavrov's saying, have a look at Rich Wrap-Ups, because I've just put the verbatim transcript. He's saying earlier photos of troops were from a computer game. He had a joint conference with Zarif. They've sent a new diplomatic note to Ukraine. Lavrov says Russia to ensure security for a second convoy. If Ukraine keeps same logic, nothing good to come. Rebels pushing back government forces to protect civilians, he said. Accusations because rebels pushing back Ukrainian troops. Lavrov says no evidence of troops in Ukraine provided. NATO accusations aren't made for the first time. Then talking about Iran, sanctions didn't slow down Iran nuclear program. Iranian Foreign Minister Zarif was speaking in Moscow. Zarif said Iraq extremists can bring violence to Europe and the US. So clearly some interesting and very fluid situation there. I'll put up a photograph of Russian soldiers near the border with Ukraine. The photograph is from Reuters. Another photograph I found on the BBC, shelling continuing in the city of Donetsk. I'll put up that photograph. And then I saw on breaking news that UN human rights official is estimating that the current total death toll in Ukraine fighting is 2,593, which is a big number. In that weekend piece where I was talking about an uncertain world, really, NATO, I said, has thrown a whole new characterization of warfare called ambiguous warfare, and that, in my opinion, eastern Ukraine has become a shadow zone. Moving on to Syria, I agree with this comment from Global Research. The US is still holding a stick behind its back. Washington could use its intervention in Iraq to open a gateway for intervention against Syria as a means of shifting the balance of power against the Syrian government. Washington is now talking about intervening in Syria to bomb the same troublesome groups that it is supposedly fighting in Iraq. Pentagon military honcho General Martin Dempsey has stated that the ISIL-DAISH cannot be defeated unless the United States or its partners take on the Sunni militants in Syria. Speaking about the Pentagon strikes in Iraq, General Dempsey stated, "Can they be defeated without addressing that part of the organization that resides in Syria? The answer is no." Going back to Ebola, if you get a chance, have a look. I made quite a few comments in that inside story, more in the second half. But the WHO is saying, WHO is saying that Ebola cases may surpass 20,000. Given the massive undercount, in my opinion, I said in that interview with Laura Kyle that I thought, 200,000 is a legitimate projection, in my view. A number of people falling ill is accelerating. More than 40% of the infections happening in the past 21 days. 2014 Ebola virus disease outbreak continues to evolve in alarming ways, they said. The virus has infected more than 3,000 people. And then they put out a bunch of tweets, which I've sort of transcribed onto the website, it's basically saying that the Ebola outbreak in DRC is believed to be unrelated to the ongoing outbreak in West Africa. But, I think it could be a mutation, and you get the situation where you get a very fast mutation, but essentially it's the same thing. Ebola case index in DRC was a pregnant woman who butchered a bush animal killed and given to her by her husband. Then a report on Trust saying gene studies of Ebola in Sierra Leone show virus is mutating fast. Genetic studies of some of the earliest Ebola cases in Sierra Leone reveal more than 300 genetic changes in the virus as it leapt from person to person. Changes that could blunt the effectiveness of diagnostic tests and experimental treatments now in development, researchers said on Thursday. We found the virus is doing what viruses do, it's mutating, said Pardis Sabeti of Harvard University, who led the massive study of samples from 78 people in Sierra Leone, all of whose infections could be traced to a faith healer, whose claims of a cure attracted Ebola patients from Guinea, where the virus first took hold. Very interesting piece. That's again linked on Rich Wrap-Ups. And as I said in my piece, viruses exhibit non-linear and exponential characteristics. I said on Sunday the Ebola virus continues to gain velocity. And I was referencing comments made on August 22nd by WHO, who said the magnitude of the Ebola outbreak has been underestimated. I agree with them. And they spoke of the existence of an invisible caseload of patients who are not being detected by the surveillance system, spoke of the existence of numerous shadow zones. I did two earlier interviews about the same subject, one with Hong Kong Phoenix TV and another one with CNC News, which will give you a view of what I was thinking. I learnt a rumour which was totally false spread that we had sprayed the market in order to transmit the virus to locals. Traore said people revolted, resorted to violence, prompting soldiers to intervene. This is another flashpoint risk problem. Interesting article about the billion-dollar fall of the House of Espirito Santo. This is Reuters' special report, well worth reading, finished off by quoting Pope Francis. Don't cry for what you have lost, fight for what you have. Japan fearing toilet paper panic makes stockpiling plea, apparently. Right, that headline's going to catch your attention, isn't it? Graphic images and video from Reuters of the Islamic State executing 250 Syrian soldiers. That video link is on the website as well. And really, it's pretty alarming, isn't it? But, the extraordinary thing about the world is they are, in Syria, essentially allies in the attempt to overthrow Assad. Euro 131.80, dollar index 82.49, Japanese yen 103.89, Swissy 0.9149, pound 166.04, Aussie 0.9347, Indian rupee 60.492, South Korean won 1013.80, Rial 223.98, Egyptian pound 714.70, South African rand 1060.38. I'll put up a one-year chart of the dollar index, and I remain fundamentally bullish about it now. Actually, I think we're headed now from here 82.49 to 84.50. And as I said over the weekend, you see, in the old days, these conditions would have created, and I was talking about this new uncertain world, shadow zones, all that kind of thing, a flight into the dollar. And interestingly, the dollar has been punching higher. If things tip big, the dollar might soar, and I still stand by that. Euro dollar 131.81. Commodity markets, gold was last at 12.84. I can't get bullish about it, obviously, in a situation where I see a stronger dollar. Crude oil, which was looking badly oversold, has popped its head above $95, $95.12 last. Coming to Africa, in Beijing he got the VIP treatment. Red carpet, 21-gun salute, toasts to traditional friendship, forged in the glorious years when we stood shoulder to shoulder against imperialism, colonialism and hegemony. Zimbabwe state media quoted officials with Mugabe in Beijing as saying funding was needed for some $4 billion in projects, including energy, road and dam construction, rehabilitation of a dilapidated rail system, upgrading the state telecom system, and developing an industrial factory park. Chinamasa, who's the finance minister, declined to give more details, saying only that the new memorandum signed set out the framework under which we can be able to access funding. Few believe Southern Africa's most prominent surviving liberation hero after Nelson Mandela died in December left Beijing empty-handed. China's support for Mugabe stretches back to the days when it backed his guerrilla war against white-ruled Rhodesia in the 1970s and continued after he was elected president following independence from Britain in 1980. I'm sure the Chinese authorities will be able to offer some help to an old friend, Sir Joseph Cheng, professor of political science at the City University of Hong Kong, but he said business like Beijing would seek real economic returns. However generous the package that Mugabe takes back from his eastern ally, there are questions over how much this can really help Zimbabwe's struggling economy. I don't think it's a game changer in any significant way, unless there are details that they are hiding from us, said John Robertson, private economic consultant in Harare. I don't think the Chinese are going to pony up. They'll pony up, the bare minimum, I think, in the circumstances. Xi Jinping, I'll put up a photograph of him showing, because they're pretty hard-nosed businessmen. Xi Jinping shows Zimbabwe's President Robert Mugabe the way during a welcome ceremony outside the Great Hall of the People in Beijing. I'll put up that photograph. The South African all-shares up 10.5% this year. It's below 51,000 again. Dollar rand, as I said, I'll put up a 6-month chart. Still in that range. We've been there for a very long time. 10.30 to 11. Egyptian pound 7.15. Egyptian stock market up 39.11% this year. This is multi-year highs. 9,435. It really has soared under CC. Nigerian all share, whilst at 8-week lows, has flipped back into positive territory. It's plus 0.2347%. Ghana Stock Exchange is at 7-month lows, but up 2.517%. Nestle has hired a Swiss gentleman as their new CEO for its Nairobi hub. I'd gone to that function the night before when Ian was saying his farewells and Cornell was being introduced. Nestle has hired Swiss national Cornell Krummenacher as CEO for its Nairobi hub. The incoming boss will be tasked with driving sales in the equatorial African region made up of 21 countries, where Nestle has 4 factories in Kenya, Zimbabwe, Angola, and DR Congo, more than 1,000 employees. Mr. Krummenacher will take office on September 1st. He will have the task of defending and growing the market share of Nestle's flagship products such as Cerelac, KitKat, Nesquik, cereal, Nescafe coffee, Milo, Nestea, Maggi noodles, and Boost energy drink. We do a little bit of work for them on the social media surveillance side, most enjoyable, and some other stuff. And I'm grateful for that relationship. And it was a pleasure to meet. I was a good friend of Ian. We got on very well. And a pleasure to meet Mr. Krummenacher. And they're currently flying around their empire in Africa, taking a up close and personal look. Nation Media reported first half profit after tax was up 2.879%. First half turnover up 2.877%. Profit before tax up 20966%. EPS up 1.166%, and they paid an interim dividend of 2 shillings 50 cents, unchanged. Company commentary said the void in income attributable to the general elections, which boosted the results in the first half of 2013, was mitigated by a combination of new, innovative income generation projects as well as sustained cost containment initiatives. The group will continue to take appropriate actions to mitigate the potential adverse effects of the challenges to its performance and is cautiously optimistic of sustaining growth in the remaining part of the year. Publisher of Daily Nation and owner of other media outlets in the region said last year's first half had been buoyed by the elections which kept the East African nation's population glued to televisions, radios and newspapers. My conclusions are these are inline results. It remains a strong franchise, it really is. And they are citing strong cost control as having eked out a small gain. Total Kenya reported first half profit after tax accelerated 36.8154%. Gross sales leapt 37.409% to 90.4 billion shillings. And of course, you've got to put those side by side with Kenol Kobel, who slashed turnover in order to increase margin. The cost of going after that increased revenue, up 37.409%, was gross margin declined for Total to 4% from 4.8% the previous year. Profit before tax up 37.265%. Profit after tax up 36.8154%. Earnings per share up 36.986%. Trades on a trading P of 10.817. Looks good value to me, point of fact. Home Africa released that first half profit after tax declined 73.67%. Revenue was up 13.098%. Administrative expenses spiked 88.46%. Included in administration costs are one-off expenses and the impact of the substantial activity in business operations and the various projects, resulting in an increase of 88% in the period. They concluded by saying they are very positive about the real estate industry. My conclusions are that they have a first mover, first lister advantage, and I'm constructive about real estate. Kenya shilling was last trading at 88.407, and Katrina and Javier Blas of the FT wrote a piece. Kenya's central bank appears to have drawn a line in the foreign exchange market, intervening heavily this week to prop up the local currency after the shilling fell to a near 3-year low against the dollar. The shilling's fall to a 31-month low of 88.90 against the dollar, down 3% since January. That's the key thing to remember. It's a pretty tiny movement when you think of the cedi, the kwacha, the rand. It reflects a series of blows to East Africa's largest economy as it suffers from lower hard currency revenues from its three key export sectors: tourism, tea and coffee, and horticulture. ICT tea prices have not been strong this year, and pressure has built because there's been a cratering of hard currency tourism receipts. Currency traders estimate the central bank may have sold $30 to $50 million into the market this week, more than 10 times as much as its last intervention a few months ago. Juguna Dungu, governor of the central bank, declined to comment on the intervention, but he described the shilling's weakness as a paradox. You should anticipate an appreciation of the shilling dollar since shillings are scarce, but the reverse is happening, he told the FT. Central bank's intervention appears to have so far worked, with the shilling recovering ground against major currencies. On Thursday, it traded at 88.45, where it is now, up 0.5% since the intervention started earlier on in the week. The central bank sold some dollars quite aggressively, which actually was long overdue, said a currency trader based in Nairobi. Traders said negative sentiment has been creeping into the currency, trending to the 90 levels. Once you break the psychological barrier of 90, then 95 can be the next target. So the point is, they've intervened and will continue to flex their muscles for now and contain the position within the 89 band. I said, the other worry is tourism was unlikely to right itself this year. I think you're going to have a second wave of weakness because of the Ebola scare, and that's going to put people off Africa in general, because for so many people abroad, it's just one place. However, a more positive note, I think the retreat in the price of oil that we've been speaking about until yesterday should give some respite. And the point about tourism receipts that I made was informed by my visit last week to the South Coast, where I took my panoramic photograph, about which I got very, very told off by my wife. She said, "Why did you have some woman in that photograph?" And my response now is, actually, that was the clearest evidence of how weak tourism is on the South Coast, that there was just one individual on that beach. I'll put up that photograph. On the 14th of July, I mentioned the Teflon shilling. And I'm not counting out the shilling. I think the shilling might well bounce, but it's very precarious right now. And I was saying, when you compare it to the Ghana cedi or you compare it to the Zambian shilling, it really has been a Teflon shilling. The Nairobi All Shares closed at a record every single session this week. It's up 15.1262%. Let's see if we can make it 5 out of 5. NSE 20 rallied 0.32% yesterday. It's up 3.308%. And it's at highs not seen since January the 25th. I'll put up a link so you can check any share if you're interested in. Then I came across a tweet from Barry Malone, who tweeted this, Nairobi Noir. And I'll put up the link so it's at the bottom of Rich Wrap-Ups if you're interested in photography. There's one photograph, Koinange Lane Lookout, and it's pretty arresting. Koinange Lane is down here, it's pretty infamous, and you get that flavour of it. And then I like this photograph as well, Cadillac Misingi Sasses, which is another remarkable photograph. Now, obviously, last reminder for tomorrow's Mindspeak breakfast from 9:30 at the Intercontinental. It's all free. You're most welcome. And Dennis is going to be in the house. And let me read you his motto. Life is a jungle that requires hard work, consistency, patience, cleverness, determination, experience, and sometimes luck for a pleasant survival. And it's an interesting story because he was at Moy University, few computers there, spent all his weekends on them, and became a proficient computer programmer. That's how his career started. And it's very similar to that Gladwell story of Bill Gates in point of fact. Once again, thank you for stopping by. Hope to see you tomorrow at the Intercontinental.